Hey trainers, thanks for joining us for another episode of Future Sight, which is, as you hopefully know by now, a soundproof podcast production. As per usual, I am Brendan. I am joined by Jake, and if you'd like to find us on the internet, you can find us at Mr. BDog46 or Major Bowman. I think we have relatively exclusive rights to that now that Jake's old Xbox buddy is pretty long gone. But
okay,
nonetheless,
the Major Bowman account is suspended and has been for the last 8 years since I've made that account. And I keep waiting. I keep checking. I want it so bad to be free, but I can't change my name. So I'm stuck with the underscore.
One of my favorite ongoing stories. But regardless, we're here with another episode of Future Sight this week. And as we continue on through some of the more recent VGC history that is happening, we're going about as recent as it gets, which is 2 days ago, as of recording, to the Orlando Regional Championships.
Yes, we have top 8 from Orlando, which happened the first weekend of February. We're going to be looking at Toler, Webb versus James Evans, two very accomplished players, two U.S. national champions, if you count NAIC, which I think we do.
We do.
And honestly, very similar teams, too. They both have the Gothitelle, Great Tusk, Tyranitar, Iron Bundle, just with two separate choices to round it out from there.
Yeah, so kind of similar, somewhat similar in composition, but I think as we'll sort of see this match, the differences in the team make them play pretty significantly differently. We'll get into that in a little bit. Let's talk about kind of where we are in the format and things of that nature right now. So this is the first major event of Series 2, and as we know, that can kind of breed a lot of potentially creative team building. It can cause people to rely a lot on kind of some of the things that were successful very early on or successful in the previous format or Series 1 for our purposes here. But going into this tournament, I think there were a number of things that we kind of expected to see that had targets on their back. And I don't think that Goth Tyranitar was one of them.
No, and it's really cool too, because I think Tyranitar always finds a way to be viable, if not very good, in any format it's legal in. And especially with terrestrialization, you can do so much more with it. And we had seen a lot of Tyranitar in Series 1 and a little bit of 2 with Lycanroc, so you just have it set sand for the Lycanroc, and you can have Sandbell Garchomp and stuff too. But on both of these teams, the sand benefits nothing other than the Tyranitar itself. So they're just using Tyranitar for its massive stats, pretty wide coverage, and specifically Terrifying Tyranitar is just stupid good.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more of a traditional use of the Pokemon, where it was kind of always sort of used as a standalone Pokemon with a lot of stats and unique typing as opposed to a way to enable other Pokemon. Although obviously it's had its moments with Excadrill and things of that nature. But yeah, this kind of harkens back to, the ways that it was used in yesteryear, going all the way back to 2013 and things like that. But yeah, I think it was kind of interesting that we had some convergent team building. So, it's possible that some of these ideas were borrowed from each other if they ran into each other, like ships passing in the net and ladder. But they ended up with pretty similar compositions here with kind of a few notable exceptions. And I think
even the exceptions do similar things, like Dragonite, Talonflame, Flying type, Sylveon, Fluttermane, Fairy type. It's similar ideas for those slots too, and if they settled on two different things.
Yeah, and I think that when teams are similar, and I've said this a million times, that the things that make the matchup interesting are the ways in which they diverge, and you can kind of see up on screen
I just didn't realize
there are all 4 divergent Pokemon.
That's
and
funny.
Some of them actually factor very importantly into how this plays out.
Yeah, the Fluttermane in particular, I think, is in a pretty good spot as far as Toler's team is concerned. There's not a whole lot on James's side that immediately threatens the Fluttermane. There's no super effective stabs anywhere, and there's no Terras either that particularly threaten it. Terrafire Sylveon does pretty well into it, and obviously a Terra Blast from Dragonite or Tyranitar is going to do a bunch of damage. But I think as of note, which you won't see when I start playing game 1 because it's already done the pre-turn stuff, but the Fluttermane is Booster Energy special attack. And a lot of times when it is that special attack boosting, it has a bunch of bulk invested into it as well. So I think especially on a team with Tolers with Icy Wind and Tailwind, you can afford to give up a lot of that speed. So your Flutter Mane's doing a lot more damage at the same time, sticking around a lot longer, which I think is in this matchup specifically, I think helps him a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there are a lot of people that are favoring that set right now. And then I think the one other thing that kind of like jumps out to me looking at these two like team sheets at preview here is that the opportunity to get uncontested Tailwind up is pretty important for Toler, especially when he kind of is like staring down what will be like the fastest thing on the field otherwise, which is booster bundle.
Yeah, I don't know if it's truly uncontested though, because the Gothitels do have Trick Room. So I think if Tailwind goes up, like if you just look at Toler's team, like flying Tyranitar in Trick Room is really only threatened by Toler's own Tyranitar if it hasn't terrestrialized itself. So it's something that, like, if neither player brings Gothitel, then it is super uncontested. Yeah, so you just bring Talonflame in, you get a pretty free Tailwind. The Gothitels do show up. I don't remember if they come game 1, but we'll see them at least later on.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm ready to jump into it if you are.
Yeah.
And we're here at turn 1 of game 1 here. Now, I think this is, like, in some situations, a really interesting position because, like, if you're Choice Band Dragonite, you can pin the Talonflame. But in this specific situation, I think we know that James is Lumberry, so you're not actually threatening that knockout. And then, you know,
I believe it doesn't even have extreme speed. I think it's
not. I thought
it was
did.
Dragon Dance, Terra Blast, Fire Punch. Oh, it does. It does. Never mind. Yeah.
I thought it did. Yeah.
No Dragon Claw. That's what I was thinking.
No Dragon Claw.
Yeah, but even in this case, though, if you break the Gale Wings with extreme speed, it's not going to matter. And if you do leave Dragonite in, you're kind of threatened by, like, it is Lumberry. She's not threatened by Will-O-Wisp immediately, but the Flutter Mane would have something to say about that.
Right.
Right, let's just jump in.
Let's send it. So there's a real early Terra here, which I think we see in some of the games this set. And I know Dragonite, Terra Flying is something that's more on the rise after it was like basically like a Terra Normal one trick for a lot of the format. But it's going to go for Flying here, as we're just going to watch Sylveon get cleaned immediately by two things that are faster than it. And I think that's a really like good Pokemon in this matchup here too. So James like being willing to kind of like trade it for the opposing fairy type is, you know, like I think a really interesting play. I'm not really sure if I can really pinpoint which player comes out on top here.
Yeah.
But it's like a really like explosive turn 1.
I'm wondering if Toler thought the Flutter Mane would survive that Terra Blast.
Yeah.
I think, like I mentioned earlier, if you're the special attack boosting booster energy, you're probably throwing a lot of bulk at it. There's a decent chance he thought he'd be able to like throw those 2 attacks into the Sylveon for free. Well, not free, but like without losing a Pokemon himself. And had that been the case, that would have been a really strong turn. But like you said, that becomes very explosive when the Flutter Mane does go down. Even though the Tyranitar actually looks like it's in a pretty good spot regardless.
Yeah, it definitely does. It really is a big fan of facing off against Dragonite, because as we know, even though it takes super effective damage from Earthquake, Tyranitar doesn't really care all that much because it's very bulky. And Talonflame is going to be likely moving first here if it doesn't get faked out, which it doesn't, so it's going to get the opportunity to go for a taunt.
Yeah, I get why the taunt comes out. Wanting to prevent a Dragon Dance is pretty big. That's a bulky Talonflame too, I think.
Yeah, it must be.
Yeah, I would have expected Terra Blast to do a lot more than that. But either way, like you guarantee that the Dragonite's not going to be at +1 speed, which I guess is nice. I think if you're throwing a taunt out there, I'm surprised it didn't go into the Gothitel. But the Great Tusk being here and not the Iron Bundle makes a lot more sense as to why the taunt came out, because the +1 speed Dragonite would certainly outspeed the Tusk. And even though Tusk doesn't do too much to Dragonite, it at least gives Tusk the room to fire something off before the Dragonite can attack it.
Yeah, definitely. It makes sense seeing what's in the back there. And I think that as we see close combat go into Dragonite, and surely this is going to be a double up here. And Goth is like kind of a Pokemon that exerts pretty unique pressure, but in this situation, like there's not really any reason for Toler to try and target it, and he's just going to go ahead and double up into the Dragonite.
Yeah, I don't think there was nothing that Gothitel could do there that would punish Toler for not targeting it. Like if it sets up Trick Room, then his own Tyranitar is looking really solid. If it Psychics, like, so what? The Great Tusk is not looking like it's in a very strong spot regardless. So that's a fine play. Like getting the close combat damage in the Dragonite is really all you needed, because I don't think one single Rock Slide would have knocked it out. But the Tyranitar is now in a position where it at least has the chance to face down this Iron Bundle and Gothitelle.
Do you think, now looking at it, well, I guess Iron Bundle in the back always kind of wins, but it could have made potentially some sense to attack into the, well, I guess either way, it's an attack that's going into the Tusk. So either, I'm just trying to think of that if you target differently, but I think a Terraflying Terrablast or a Psychic is knocking out the Tusk after some attack anyway. Right. So with Bundle in the back, this has like been a winning position for James for a couple turns now.
Yeah, it's a rough spot for Toler too, because you could think to like Terrestrialize the Tyranitar, lose the Hydro Pump weakness, but one, you risk a Freeze Dry read, possibly James not wanting to risk the Hydro Pump miss. And two, if you do Terrestrialize, you are now able to be damaged by the Gothitelle. So like right now for Toler, your win con is dodge the Hydro Pump and see if... Sorry, I can't get over James popping off there. That's funny. But the win con there is just dodging the Hydro Pump and knocking out the Bundle, because then the Gothitelle only has Psychic and can't damage you at all. So I think that turn one really set Toler back in a way he didn't expected. Because I don't think that's a trade you make knowingly, just given what Toler had in the back, because the Flutter Mane was really his biggest way to threaten that Dragonite without it getting an attack off.
Yeah, definitely. And I think potentially something that he could have done, like, I think the taunt was like a smart play at the time, because you're trying to prevent +1 Dragonite from basically like running through the rest of your team if you let it go. But in hindsight, potentially like having Tailwind up might have been something that was useful, because does Tusk in under Tailwind outspeed booster Bundle or no?
I don't.
It's got to be close, right?
I think it doesn't.
Maybe if it's Jolly.
I think no. I think even Jolly was like just short, because I remember looking at that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's so sad. it's either it's either Adamant misses by a few points or Jolly misses by a few points. I want to say Jolly, because I remember thinking, wow, I just can't hit Bundle at all.
Yeah, I can't do that math quick enough in my head to know, but I guess that makes more sense then. So in hindsight then, basically, as you said, like dropping Flutter Mane on turn 1 is basically like based on James's Pokemon selection, like there's not really a very good way to play out of it.
Yeah.
So then we basically are going into game 2 here with like brand new knowledge for everybody, I guess, in that situation, where like now knowing that the Flutter Mane is at least like a roll to get knocked out by a Terraflying Terrablast, that Toler has to play the turn a little bit differently, and he does that by just go ahead and leading his Fake Out. So like the combination of Fake Out plus Flutter Mane is like pretty disgusting, especially when you prevent any sort of switching, and knowing that Dragonite is it does not carry Protect, like you basically get the opportunity to just like punch it in the face if you want to.
Yeah, it doesn't have Protect, and it's multi-scale. The two things that make this a very free turn, not free turn, but a very free target into the Dragonite for Toler. Notably, we don't know the Gothitelle's speeds. We just saw James's in game 1. We never saw them on the field at the same time. And they are both carrying Fake Out. They're both the same set. They're Fake Out, Psychic, Trick Room, Taunt. And so, like, should you be bold and go for like a Fake Out speed tie, that can possibly get you pretty burned. But there's not a whole lot else to do if you're these Gothitelle, right? Like, Psychic damage isn't very relevant here. So while it's risky, I feel like it's kind of the only play in a certain way. But I don't know.
I think at least for James, you think about faking out the opposing Gothitelle. I think for Toler, it's almost always just into Dragonite.
Right.
But not knowing, there's not really anything else that James's Gothitelle is doing here.
Yeah,
that's for sure. Unless you want to start to play to some sort of like Trick Room mid game, where like you're thinking you're gonna sack off Dragonite either way, and then like have something that can take advantage of the Trick Room in the back. That's even a tricky like way of playing it, because we don't know the Tyranitar speeds either.
True,
but it is going to be Toler's Gothitelle that goes first. James is going to be a little bit slower, so at the very least they're tying, and it's just a free Dazzling Gleam for Flutter Mane.
Yeah, so there's info. At the very worst, they speed tie. Otherwise, Toler's is faster. Pretty bad turn for James. Like if you're trying to go for like a Fake Out quote speed tie, if you happen to know the speeds, losing that is pretty detrimental. I would say about the same level of setback as Toler's first turn in game 1. And that Dazzling Gleam plus Moonblast knocking out the Dragonite is not something I would have expected either. I think I'm so used to like special or like speed boosting Flutter damage calcs that is not something I would have expected. But I don't know, if you like if you can like Dazzling Gleam and Moonblast damage, which I'm sure Toler can do very well, that was probably a pretty free turn for him.
Yeah, definitely. I think you probably have an idea based on how much the Dazzling Gleam does as well, so you're in a pretty good spot there. But yeah, Fluttermane basically like not having taken any damage now, and it's next to Gothitelle, and opposing Gothitelle notably, that like it doesn't really care about taking Psychics from the opposing Gothitelle. It's basically just like free to continually launch attacks into the into the Dragonite slot.
Yeah. Also notable is that we saw the Gothitelles do Speed Tie. The taunt from James's came out first. So now, like, there's really losing English is hard. Having lost the Dragonite without getting any attacks off is quite bad because you just blew your Terrestrialization. Like, you just can't tear anything out. Like, you can't tear the Great Tusk out of a Fairy weakness anymore, which is unfortunate. The bundle coming in and just getting dropped by a Shadow Ball immediately. I don't know. There's not a whole lot left to say about this game.
I'm pretty sure the crit didn't matter there.
No, there's no way. Like you have to like specifically train it to survive a Moonblast without the special attack boost. So
yeah, so Flutter takes its third KO of the game. And this is like the kind of thing that when we first saw the stats of the Pokemon, we were like, oh,
yep,
this thing is gonna be a little scary, and we're kind of seeing it in action here as it's gonna go ahead and take its fourth KO of the game before it takes any damage. So I think the only attack that James got off that game was a fake out.
Yeah,
two fake outs. He fake outed twice into Gothitelle, and Toler is going to take that one pretty cleanly. So both games like very one-sided, with a pretty one-sided game going to James and a pretty one-sided game going to Toler here. Makes for a very interesting game 3 scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're James here, you have to put a lot more respect. You have to put a lot more respect towards the Fluttermane. I don't think that the lead is particularly bad if you happen to know that your Gothitelle is faster and you can prevent the fake out into Dragonite. But knowing now that it's a speed tie, like, I don't know if you want to risk your whole set and this whole top 8 match on another speed tie like that. Should you like try and just run back that same lead? And so I think that, if you're just looking at James's team, the Great Tusk hates Fluttermane, the Sylveon, fine. They trade pretty well with each other. The Tyranitar, if it terrestrializes, pretty good to Fluttermane. It can take those attacks pretty well. And so there's a chance we see like more of those going forward in Game 3, I would say.
Yeah, I think definitely you need to like at least have a set of Pokemon available that are not getting OHKO'd by Fluttermane.
Right.
And or at least for Dragonite, like, as we kind of know that they have like a pretty explosive like matchup into each other. If you want to use Dragonite, you need to at least make sure that it gets the opportunity to like take an attack and then fire back. Yeah. So the tools are there. Like, Fluttermane is not like an unbeatable matchup for James's team by any stretch of the imagination, and he basically just leads two things that cannot be knocked out by Fluttermane. It's like a pretty like straightforward adjustment.
And I really like this turn from James's end too, because we see the yawn here. And essentially it means that, James is saying, like, on this next turn, on turn 2, you can either take a KO or keep your Fluttermane. Like, a sleeping Fluttermane in this case is probably just a Fluttermane that's not going to ever attack again, just given like the strength of attacks that James can throw at it. So it's a really smart yawn, just forcing Toler to make a decision. Like, you can't knock out the Tyranitar while also preserving your Fluttermane here.
Yeah, and Toler chooses, I forget whether you said option A or option B, but basically he's going to take the attack and try and get momentum on turn 3 by bringing in something on 2 very weak Pokemon. So if it's like Bundle in the back, if it's Talonflame in the back, if it's Tusk in the back, basically anything is going to get the opportunity to like take 2 knockouts here based on this position. So it's tough to give up Fluttermane, especially because Toler knows that that's like kind of his best tool in this matchup, but it's not without like, getting 2 attacks off first.
Yeah, I think giving up Fluttermane kind of sells the Fluttermane's impact short. Yeah, no, I think that was a smart play, just because you get so much damage off on the Sylveon with that Moonblast. The Tyranitar is already at around half. Like, Fluttermane did a lot of damage that game, even if it didn't result in a KO, like, straight up. And so I think it did a lot of its job, especially when Toler can bring in Tyranitar, which is pretty good at cleaning up like weakened Pokemon on the other side. So I respect that.
I think this is an interesting matchup too because only one of these Tyranitar have low kick.
Yeah.
So James is like.
It's Toler's, by the way.
Right, yeah. So
Yeah.
James is kind of like has to play around the opposing Tyranitar way more carefully than Toler does.
Yeah. This is where it gets interesting though, because you'll see that
Super
James
interesting,
has the speed boosting Iron Bundle, whereas Toler's is Covert Cloak. So it won't be icy, or it can't be icy winded, but the Tyranitar on Toler's side can. And now that Toler's down to just 2 Pokemon, any speed drops are going to stick. So Toler has, or rather James has a good way to make sure the Tyranitar on Toler's end is not going to be as much of a problem.
Right, and it's gonna barely survive the icy wind there too, which I think it's kind of like reasonable to expect. And I'm not sure Toler. Obviously, they're both playing Assault Vest Tyranitar. The sand is up, so Toler like has a pretty good idea of how much damage this is gonna do, and it's like entirely possible that it's a roll. But either way, it's like kind of a miss there. Yeah.
Yeah. This is interesting still though, because now that they're both down to the last 2, Great Tusk, not a big fan of seeing either a flying type or the Iron Bundle. So a lot of it's probably going to come down to how the speed interactions work with these icy winds going off. And even like freeze dry damage into the bundle mirrors here. Honestly, having played a lot of Assault Vest Tyranitar, part of me in my head thought it might be able to eat that freeze dry. But I'm so used to it being like in sand as well, and since it terastallized, it lost its special defense boost.
I always forget
which is
about
unfortunate.
That.
Yeah. But the funniest thing to me is Tyranitar terastallizing into something that's not like rock ground or rock steel or ground. Yeah, ground. And then taking damage from its own sand. I think that's hilarious. Eventually we come down to this bundle mirror though, and Toler smartly icy winding there. I guess it just gives him a chance to win the speed tie on the second turn. But even with winning the speed tie, it ends up not mattering.
It's so close.
Yeah.
It's so close. Yeah, this is like I don't know, like a whole set of kind of like chaotic mirrors, right? Where these like Tyranitar are facing each other down. One of them has low kick, and they both have the same Terra. And then this is probably the most chaotic of all mirrors in this format.
Yeah.
Where these 2 bundles are like freeze drying each other, and you can see how close it is to a knockout. But no dice, and the possibility was there for Toler to win, depending on, it might have come down to 2 rolls. It was 14 HP, but it kind of makes for an interesting endgame where he gets to be the one that does at least 1 icy wind to like force the speed tie and get a second attack off. But ultimately, James is able to pull it out with his bundle there.
Yeah, I think that's like objectively the right play is going for icy wind there, and the turn prior, obviously to get the Tyranitar speed advantage, but it is rough. I don't know if that even can be a roll, just because the icy wind like window is very, very small because it's double resisted. So like it might range from like I didn't see the actual number, but maybe it does
like a 3 or 4
from
HP
8
roll,
to 11 damage or something like that.
Right.
And I don't think that maybe the freeze dry window is wide enough for that, but play like that is the correct play if you ask me. But still, it seemed a little bit doomed there when the icy wind did no damage there.
Right. The point being, regardless of whether or not it was a roll, it was a really close game. And
Yes.
for these kinds of sets where they kind of swing, and then come down to a third game 3 are probably some of the most exciting sets to watch.
Yeah.
And I think it was really well played by both players too. And this is I thought it was a pretty good representation of the way that the format can be in a lot of games, where there's a lot of like big attacks coming out from both sides, and you have to kind of like choose where you put your damage very carefully, and then kind of like we talked about with Toler sacking off his Flutter Mane, like choose when you're going to sack off a Pokemon to try and gain offensive momentum, by doing that.
In retrospect, how do you feel about losing the Flutter on that second turn? Like, do you think saving it could have changed the outcome? I'm not saying that was the wrong play, because I agree that was smart, but just like in a thought experiment, had Toler swapped something in there on it was a Crunch and a Hyper Voice. Do you think that could have gone differently?
He had Bundle and T-Tar in the back. I mean, you could make an argument, right, for swapping in Tyranitar. Did we know that? Well, I guess we did. Or at least we found out in Game 3 what their speeds were to know whether or not like there's a potential where you go for like Trick Room and swap in Tyranitar or something there.
I think James Tyranitar crunched the Gothitelle before Toler's used Rock Slide.
Okay.
On the turn following.
So I guess there's something. But we didn't find that out until after. So I guess like potentially with that knowledge, there's something to be said for like Trick Rooming and switching in Tyranitar. But I don't know. I feel like that's
it's risky. I'm just saying, like, in a world where the Flutter was still like, the Flutter stuck around more than turn 2. Like, the Flutter was clearly the key in game 2 for Toler, taking 4 knockouts in like 4 different turns. So I was a little surprised Toler not gave it up, because like we said, it did a lot of damage still, and like it primed the Tyranitar on Toler's side pretty well, which is, if you're playing for a Tyranitar endgame, that's what it should be doing. Part of me just thinks like, well, maybe if the Flutter was still around to get a lot more damage out, something could have changed, but it's hard to make that decision in the moment.
Well, I think what you do then, well, it has to be Tyranitar switching in then,
yeah,
right?
For sure.
And if Sylveon and Tyranitar are both faster than Toler's Tyranitar, are you ever getting an attack off there with that slot? I don't think so.
You're not, no. I think that's a play you make if you know that you can Trick Room and be the slowest thing in the field.
Yeah, so maybe it was like a lose-lose situation. I don't know. That position. I think it's a really smart lead from James is ultimately what it comes down to. Yeah, like super smart lead. Probably a correct lead, and something that he probably could have gone with game 2 as well, but he figured it out going into game 3.
Well, because Toler brought Tusk game 1, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he did.
And so that's not like, it's not a great lead into Tusk, but having seen Toler just win game 2 with 2 Pokemon, I don't think
it's
that
a
Tusk
really
is
good lead into the Flutter stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, really interesting set. James, I think, went on to get knocked out in top 4 here. By
he lost to Wolf.
He just got wolfed, right? Yeah, that was. I remember I forget who I was talking to, but after Wolf beat Amelia, it was kind of like, nobody left in the field has a matchup into Parrish, so this is pretty much over. By the way, Wolf is like insanely impressive and the greatest player of all time.
I think like this was going around on Twitter, both on Twitter and in person, but the fact that we had an 8-year gap between Wolf beating Ashton in finals with Parrish and Wolf beating Ashton in finals with Parrish is crazy. Like, that's so funny. That happened in 2015 in Massachusetts, and then again here, which is so cool.
We did that one of his matches from that tournament actually
against Amelia,
where he played against Amelia.
That was a good one.
So yeah, that was insane. It was a really exciting tournament, a lot of big names. Obviously it's huge, and now going into the next set of tournaments here, we finally have day 2 Swiss.
Yay!
So all these kind of like exciting things are happening for the circuit right now, where I think open team sheets is part of this too, but we continue to like progress towards a reduction in variance, which is like one of the things about this game that can drive you crazy. But seeing all of these big names continue to bubble to the top is like, I think, very good for the scene. And with like day 2 Swiss, where you don't have to worry so much about like the toll on your body, and then the extra amount of games to kind of reduce the variance between the gooder players and the not so gooder players. It's just like really exciting to follow VGC right now. It's like it's fun to be a part of. It
really is. The day 2 Swiss announcement is either, we're recording this on Tuesday after Orlando. It was either today or yesterday. My days are all mixed up, but
I think it was yesterday. Yeah,
that sounds right. So the day after Orlando, which was the biggest regional ever for VGC, the longest regional ever. Certainly, we didn't finish. I say as if I played 10 rounds, but round 10 of Swiss didn't finish until I think like 10:30 or something, and they held everyone evil. For top cut. I think that I saw Wolf's tweet that they didn't get to leave the venue until like 11:30. Yeah,
you gotta be kidding me.
It's so rough, like, and especially because if you top cut, I think Wolf said you have to be there like 7:45 the next morning.
Yep.
Which is such a quick turnaround. And so I'm very happy that we do have that 2-day Swiss structure now. Because I think in terms of reducing the variance, there are TCG players that have they're like stacking up regionals wins in the same way that Wolf is across their careers. And so I think having more rounds of Swiss, having that day 2 structure, I do think is just something else that will contribute to, like, in theory, the best player at the tournament winning the tournament, which I think is a good thing.
I think it's a good thing, definitely. Yeah, no more like random like EXO Swiss runs from somebody that just like, I don't know.
You're talking to someone who had one of those, so speak carefully, Brendan.
No, but that wasn't random. But like, especially when it
wasn't the
best of
time.
one.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the time.
There's just one that I think of. I forget what the West Coast regional was, but it was either 2014 or 2015 where somebody was running like a hard rain team with like Charge Beam, Mega Manetric. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to see if I can go find it. But it was just like a hard rain, like the rainiest 1100 showdown team you could think
Oh
of.
gosh.
That made like an EXO run through the tournament and then just got bodied in top 8 the next day by like a Azumarill Amoonguss. But those are the kinds of things that like are sort of exciting at the time, but ultimately you're like, wait, why are we rooting for this? Like, don't we want to see actual VGC? So yeah, those kinds of things being eliminated from possibility, I think are really cool. And we are obviously like on the same side of this argument, and some people don't feel the same way, but
yeah, and that's fair. Like I think
open
there's
team sheets good, day 2 Swiss good, yeah. Like no, reduction in variance very good.
That's like the general opinion. I mean, people will have their like valid reasons for disliking one or the other, and I think that's fine. But I think for the most part, that reduction in variance is going to happen pretty like ostensibly because of these changes. The real opinion is whether you like that or not, and that is something that is a very valid argument. Yeah,
definitely. But either way, we saw a lot of top names at the top of this tournament. Of course, like James and Toler, like argue. I mean, Toler and even James is like starting to make a push into like the top 20, top 15 of all time.
Yeah.
With the accomplishments that he's stacking up. So yeah, we're seeing some of like the best players of all time here facing off into top 8, which is good for VGC. So we're excited to bring you that match. Excited about the future of VGC. Of course, if you have any feedback for us going forward, you can find us on the Twitter. You can find us on YouTube in the comments there. You can find us in any of the various VGC Discords that we frequent. Any way that you want to tell us about this project, we do enjoy doing it, and especially in such an exciting time for VGC.
Yeah. I also, like, small self-plug, that like little interview thing I did on the Day 1 stream in Orlando, so much fun. I got to talk with like Dawes and Maeve for, it was probably like 15-20 minutes. It was in between rounds 8 and 9. So if you want more of me, you can go check that out. That was a really fun time.
Yeah, it sounds like it's almost as fun as doing Future Sight every 2 weeks, so that's good for you, Jake.
Yeah, sure. Totally.
Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll be back in another 2 weeks with whatever other events we have coming up. I'm not going to try to figure out what they are. OCIC. Oh, OCIC. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's going to be a big one. It's not
this coming weekend, but the one after. So it'll be right before we record.
We'll have that.
Yeah.
We'll have brand new with 2 weeks worth of meta developments for Series 2. Oh, thanks for coming. We'll see you in 2 weeks.